It's a fire in love. It's a fire in love. feel this.
Hello, welcome to the Fresh Air Sci-Fi Show. I'm Joe,
And I'm Dave.
and tonight we are going to be discussing the trolley problem. In fact, I'm going to sit down because I've done my knee. I know I usually stand up for these, but yeah.
Sitting down is always good.
It is when you got a bit of a dodgy knee.
I can't say anything. I'm lying on a bed.
How you doing anyway, Dave?
Yeah, not too bad. How's yourself?
Yeah.
Besides the dodgy knee.
Well, yeah. There's always something, so I can't complain. Let's go with that.
Okay.
But yeah, I also have to apologise to everyone for missing last Thursday's stream. I was getting physio, not on my knee, and yeah, I basically, by the time I got in, I was starving because it got delayed, and then I actually just completely forgot about it, and it wasn't until someone said. Critical Cripple Dave, a different Dave, on Twitter was like, wasn't there supposed to be a stream tonight? And I was
Well, at least we know we have people waiting to see us.
Yeah, that's good. Even if it's only one. In fact, I also noticed in the chat earlier on our Discord channel that Opie was a bit disappointed as well. So apologies to everyone, especially you two who cared enough to say something. So anyway, I suppose we should really move on with tonight. Now, what we're going to be discussing is a few different thought experiments. We're going to start off with the trolley problem one. Dave, do you just want to take people through what is meant by a thought experiment?
Okay, a thought experiment is basically, it's the same as any other experiment, but it drives it figuring out what our intuitions might be about something, or drives how we think about a certain topic.
So, in other words, it as it sounds, it's an experiment of your mind, the way you think about things, the way you
Yeah.
process it. It's not something that you can necessarily test in the same way that you might with a scientific experiment. Apart from just what you think and what other people think, and maybe tally results together to see what the general consensus are. But
Yeah, they kind of do that in experimental philosophy.
and so that's basically what we're going to be covering off tonight. Now, there is one that absolutely everybody knows. I've already mentioned it. It's the trolley problem. So let me load up some images now. I just need to switch screen. No, that's not what I need to do. I need to share screen, and I need to share photos. Right. So where's that disappeared to? Right, there we go. So this is the standard trolley problem. Dave, do you want to describe what's on the screen there for us?
It's a trolley barreling down a track and the person has the choice to pull a lever and either divert the trolley to the track containing one person or the track containing 5 people.
Exactly. So this trolley is...
Well, except for that one, which is going to kill them all.
Oh, yeah. Look at that. That was supposed to be the standard trolley problem, and I've just noticed it's not.
That's not the standard trolley problem. That's the Metallica one.
Okay, that's typical, isn't it? So what that's supposed to be, the image on screen, is supposed to be the standard trolley problem, but I've labeled it wrong. So basically, ignore the bit on the edge here.
The U-turn.
Yeah. Let's go back to... Let's have a look at that as well. That's probably a little bit better as well, isn't it? So a bit easier for you to all see there. So ignore the U-turn at the end of this particular image. So generally, with the trolley problem, it's going to be going on. So it's on the path of going to kill the 5 people, and you have the option to pull the lever and kill the 1, or leave the lever and allow 5 people to die. And the question is, what do you do? So there are some common thoughts on this. A lot of the common ones are saving the many outweighs the needs of the few. There are some that would say that pulling the lever means that you're actually responsible for that one person's death. Whereas you're not responsible for tying any of the folks to the tracks in the first place. Therefore, pulling the lever would be immoral because you caused the death rather than just allowing people to die that would have died were you not there. But also you could argue against that and say once you're aware of the situation, you become a moral agent in that situation, and therefore your inaction is a form of action because you could have saved the 5 people. And more often than not, you'll find loads of people trying not to answer the question, saying they would stop the trolley by some other means, like jumping onto the track or putting the brakes on the trolley or anything like that, which, it's not part of the thought experiment. That isn't what this one is about. But that is one of the common frustrations with something like the trolley problem. Now, there are also various ways this would be answered if you happened to adhere to a particular moral theory. For example, there are a number of different ones. So the high-level moral theories are the consequentialist, where the actions define if something's moral or not. Deontological, where you're basically following rules, and virtue ethics. So consequentialist moral theories like act utilitarianism or welfareism. Dave, how would these be answered if you adhered to one of those moral theories?
Well, the utilitarian would go for pulling the lever and killing the 1 because it would increase the amount of happiness. There's more happiness generated by saving the 5 than by saving the 1.
And what about... I suppose it would be the same with preference satisfaction utilitarianism as it would be act utilitarianism. What about
Well, you wouldn't really have time to find out the preferences of all the people.
No, but you'd have to assume them, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And
But what happens if all the 5 have tied themselves there because they want to die and you pulled the lever?
yeah, technically you would have done something immoral under
Yep.
welfareism. I mean, preference satisfaction. Yeah. What about welfareism?
And that's more kind of economic based. So, but yeah, under welfareism, I suppose you could go with pulling the lever is the best thing too, because you're saving more.
There. So, in general, a consequentialist moral theory, you would probably say that you would pull the theory. Pull the theory? Yes, so just pull the theory right out of there. You'd pull the lever. Even under preference satisfaction, you generally assume that people would prefer not to be killed, but you might be wrong.
Yeah. I mean, in that case, the individual on the track probably would prefer not to be killed as well. So you would still be doing something immoral. It's just that you would have taken the least immoral path in a kind of dirty hands situation.
Yeah, or lesser of two evils, as some might say.
Yeah.
So what about deontological moral theories? How would they answer that?
It would all depend on the kind of deontological theory, really.
So under Kantianism, for example,
you'd just leave the trolley going.
Because that would be an act of killing someone.
Yeah, and there's the whole argument of inaction being an action itself, and you choosing to let it hit the 5 is the same as you choosing it to hit the 5. But I mean, you could argue against that in a way by saying, well, look, no, I've just let nature take its course.
Would you say a similar sort of thing for rule utilitarianism?
It would depend on the rule.
The rules are supposed to maximize pleasure, though, aren't they? So if a rule has been set out, you would imagine that saving as many people as possible in a situation like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fair. What about something like virtue ethics?
That's kind of a difficult one, but the most just thing to do, I suppose, would be to pull the lever because you're saving 5 people.
Yeah, I mean that's basically where I think you'd be at with something like virtue ethics as well.
You could probably make up for it by taking care of the person's family and that, doing something more virtuous, saying, look, I had no choice. I made the best call that I could. Here's the reasons for doing it. Let me help you get through this.
Yeah, interesting. There's probably, you're right, there's a lot more to it if you're thinking along the lines of virtue ethics.
Yeah.
Because with something like consequentialism, as we said, it's just the consequences that matter. So you wouldn't necessarily think anything further than that. And the same with deontology, it's just following the rules. Whereas with virtue ethics, it's a lot more cognitive and a lot more agent based. So you're right. You'd be actually thinking about this one a little bit more. Interesting. Cool. So, I mean, if we were to think about this, then you can actually think that there are things that we could do to change the trolley problem. As you can see, I've put one of I've got the wrong one up there. But when you are looking at the trolley problem, it's considered a blank template. All lives counting as equal. There's nothing like this person is that, and so on and so forth.
That with the trolley problem, the people on the track are the variable, and in like any experiment, you have a controlled variable, and that the people on the track are the controlled variable. So if you want to get it different intuitions, you would change that variable.
Exactly. So as it stands, there is no real context on what these people are. They are essentially just normal people, all equal to each other, and the only real objective means is probably going, well, there's 5 there and there's 1 there, so you can use mathematics and maybe reason that, say, 5 is better than 1. Some might still not pull the lever, as we've said before, because they take the positive action being worse than the inaction. There are some who might make arguments that, add context in. Well, what if those 5 people happen to be murderers, etc. So if we do add context like that, if you were to say those 5 people laying down there are Trump's family and Trump himself, and the 1 person will cure cancer, we might suddenly change our mind on how we were to act. So there are a few others that I'm going to show you now that have had some context put into it. So this one, ignoring the nuke, the idea of this one is you have... Shall I zoom in a little bit for people? Sorry. There you go. You essentially, it's the same trolley problem, except there's a bridge in front of the trolley problem, and you have the ability to push a fat man off the bridge who is heavy enough to stop the trolley. It will kill this fat man. Now, obviously, for him to be able to stop a speeding trolley, you can imagine that he has to be incredibly large. So you'd imagine he would be incredibly unhealthy. So you have an option here of, do you push the fat man off the bridge to stop the trolley? So
yeah, the point of this one is it sort of shows how people will think, if you pull the lever, you kill 1 person, but you save 5. But you're not directly killing somebody in order to save the 5. You're just diverting something that's already going to happen. Whereas in the case of the fat man, you would be directly killing somebody. You would be ending their life to save 6. You're still sacrificing 1 to save many, but it adds that layer of direct involvement. That's what it's the point of it is to see how far somebody is willing to go, and just to see whether they hold to that kill 1 to save 5 in a slightly different context.
Yeah. And there are arguments that you could make along those. I mean, those 6 people on the tracks all look like normal, healthy people, and someone might make an argument that actually the fat man has clearly not looked after his life, doesn't respect his own life well enough to look after it, or something like that. I mean, if he's big enough to be able to stop a trolley. And they might say, well, maybe it's better to use them. They might not live that long anyway because they're going to have a heart attack. But as you say, there's also the point where you're having to actively push this man off of a bridge to get this to happen. So you are technically more responsible.
Well, you're directly responsible, because that fat man wouldn't have come to any harm without you pushing him in front. Whereas the ones tied to the tracks would come to some harm no matter what you did.
So if we were to think about this in the terms of our moral theories again, how would we deal with it with a consequentialist moral theory?
Well, that's kind of a difficult one, isn't it? Is the consequences... I mean, you could go with something like the doctrine of double effect, where you assuage your guilt by saying, I wasn't pushing the fat man to kill him, I was pushing the fat man to save 6 people. So I wasn't murdering somebody, I was saving somebody. It's basically semantics, isn't it? But you've still killed somebody. Yeah. The consequences of your actions are that you killed somebody who wasn't going to die.
but you've yeah. I guess it depends on the form of consequentialist moral theory. But I do think under something like act utilitarianism, if you considered the consequences, it would probably be the most moral thing to push the fat man off, especially if you took into account the fact that the other 6 people on the track would probably live a longer life. I don't know.
Yeah.
Although, if you were to say welfareism, as you said, that's more economical. Would it be better to save the fat man because he'd eat more? If that's the case, I'm safe.
So am I. But yeah, it really is just to throw a spanner into the works of people who argue that it's better to sacrifice one to save many.
Yeah.
That's basically the whole point of this one.
Yeah, it just adds another layer of context, something else to think about. And as you say, it throws another spanner in the works.
So would you push the fat man?
Me? Oh, you're putting it on me now. If it was someone, probably, if I'm honest. Yeah. I can justify it. In fact, this is one that I've thought about lots. And I thought maybe if I threw a chocolate bar down, he'd jump down himself.
Possibly.
No, but I know that isn't part of it. That's me doing what a lot of people do and adding another dimension to the problem. I probably would. I'd feel awful about it. But if they, in my mind, this person is incredibly unhealthy. And they'd have to be able to stop a speeding trolley. The only thing is, would I be able to push them if they were heavy enough to stop a trolley? Would I be able to do it? Are they teetering on the edge, and all I have to do is that? I think I'd give it a go. I think I'd at least try and push them. Hopefully, I'd do it in time. And
So fat people deserve to die?
No, not at all. But I mean, if that was the case, I'd be dead, wouldn't I?
And me. But that's the way it sort of comes across, doesn't it? It's like, well, he's fat, he's not as healthy as the others. He's not took care of himself, so he's the one who deserves to die.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put it in terms of deserve. Yeah, I just put it in the way I'd see it is if we have people who have a better chance of living a fuller, happier life, then
what happens if he's living a full and happy life? He's just fat.
Yeah, he could be. I mean, if he's that big that he can stop a trolley, I find it hard to believe that he's living a full and happy life. But if he's big enough to stop a trolley, I'd also wonder how he got up those stairs.
Yeah. Escalator?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I mean, it's tough, isn't it? It does make it that much more difficult. And I do go back and forth, and I appreciate your objections, but I do still feel that if this is my choice, and I have to make a choice, I would definitely do something rather than nothing, because I do believe as soon as you're aware of a situation, you become a moral agent, and your inaction is a form of action. So inaction would be allowing 5 people to die. So my choice then becomes the one person that's on the trolley and someone who is incredibly unhealthily overweight. And it does sound like you're being weightist. But I think my initial gut reaction would be that, that would be it. What would you do?
I'd tell the guy to pull the lever and kill the one on the track.
Would you?
Because if you're going to kill the fat man, yeah, then by not pushing the fat man off, you still saved that life. So you've still sacrificed one for 6.
Yeah. And I suppose if it's someone else pulling the lever, rather than it being... See, I always see this problem as you being both of those people, rather than shouting to someone to pull the lever.
But that's not logically possible.
No, but you have that option. Wherever you are, you've got that time. But yeah, fair. I mean, that adds something to it that I haven't thought about it. Then you're not actually taking any action at all, are you? Really, you're just
No, because you're still telling that one person to pull the lever, so you are still responsible for the pulling of the lever.
Yeah, but they could choose not to.
Yeah, but then that's on them.
Yeah, yeah. No, I get what you're saying. I still think I go with the fat man, but
That's
yeah.
because you're a bully who hates fat people, and I'm leaving.
I sort of try and put myself in that situation. If I could be that person who is pushed off to save those people, is that what I would prefer to happen? And obviously, I wouldn't prefer to die, but if there are complete innocents there, I'd probably go, right, yeah, this is what we have to do. Now, if I was actually in that situation, I'd probably feel differently about it, and I'd probably be too scared to do it. I like to think that if I was in that situation, and as the fat man, I would sacrifice myself for the others. But that's probably because I think I'm better than I am.
I would hope I would, but there's no knowing what you would do until you're in that actual situation.
No. We need the good place and go through the trolley problem again and again and put ourselves in different situations.
One of my favorite scenes in any show ever.
Yeah, it was brilliant. Oh, right. So the next one is for some reason not going to the next one. I'm gonna have to turn it off and on again.
Have you tried switching it off and on again?
Oh, it's because I'd set them all as PNGs except these two. That was silly of me. Right. Let's go back to. There we go. Here we are. That one doesn't seem to be coming through, does it?
The artificial intelligence trolley problem?
Yeah, you can see it, but it's not coming through to the stream.
Hang on.
Hang on. It's popping. It's faded. What's it doing? There we go. How strange. it's
Okay, yeah, I can see it on the stream.
Yeah. Oh, how you doing, Adam and RB? Hope you're all right. We're just discussing the trolley problem. Don't know if you got the beginning of the stream. We're on to different different variations of the trolley problem. So this is the artificial intelligence trolley problem. You've been replaced by a fully sentient robot that you yourself have designed. Would you still be held morally responsible for the outcome of the situation? So, I mean, there's different variations on this one as well, but this is essentially saying that, you know, you've designed and built said robot. It's your programming, so it has decided. You know, it's based all of its conclusions on what you yourself have programmed it. Are you responsible for whatever it chooses?
Well, if you're the one who determined the choice, essentially you are responsible for those choices.
Exactly. If we thought about it in a more simplistic manner, the robot is essentially a tool. I know this one's saying it's fully sentient, so it's not as simple as you know, like a gun is not immoral. The wielder of a gun is immoral, but it's fully sentient. But you have basically programmed its neural structure, so it is going to be, in a way, deterministic about the way it thinks about things, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if it's fully autonomous, then no, you're responsible for the creation of the robot, not its choices. But if it's determined by your programming, then yeah, essentially you are responsible, aren't you?
Yeah. Okay. Let's put it another way. Instead of the robot, let's talk about a child. It's your child. It has been taught your entire life by the morals and things like that you have taught it yourself, and therefore it is free to make its own choice, but it takes what you have said.
Yeah, but we're deterministic. There's no
It's-
such thing as free will. So the
Let's not go down
universe
that
is responsible.
one. Let's not go down that one again today. Free will's a mindfuck. So RB says I would have to follow the guidance in the book written by Isaac Asimov. Well, that's funny that you say that because look what the next one is. There you go. It's the trolley problem of Isaac Asimov's first law of robotics. A robot may not injure a human being through inaction or allow a human being to come to harm. So they can't action or inaction. So what the hell do they do?
Throw themselves in front of the trolley, or find a fat robot.
Yeah. So would they be able to? They'd probably throw themselves in front of it, but probably still allow them to come to harm. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Using those particular parameters, it would probably make a judgment call, wouldn't it? And throw the lever, I imagine. That's the way I'd see it. Or just blow up through a recursive error in its brain because it can't make the decision because its program says it's not allowed to do either of those things. Yeah. Divo, bad command file name.
Well, if it's configuring an update for Windows 10, it'll be there long past the time the trolley hits the humans. So it won't be any of the wiser.
Right, the next one. The teleporter problem, trolley problem. You're far away. The only way to pull the lever is to use a teleportation machine. If you do it, will it be you pulling the lever? So this goes into the teleporter problem, where essentially, if you teleport, you're essentially completely destroyed, and it's a completely new matter. Is it still you, or is it a copy of you? They did an interesting form of the trolley problem, the teleporter problem in that show with
Star
Paul
Trek
Rudd.
Next Gen?
Oh, they've done that, but Paul Rudd.
Yeah, that was pretty good as well.
Yeah, but yeah, you're right. They did the Rikers, where there were two Rikers because of a teleporter accident. Yeah, it is interesting. It does make you think as well. You know, if we were to presuppose for a moment that there was something like a soul or something like that, and you were to go through a teleporter, you would essentially be killed. It would essentially be committing suicide. So if Catholicism is true, you're straight to hell. And then what is this thing walking around without a soul? Because a soul isn't created through teleportation. Or does it go with you?
Well, if that was the case, there wouldn't be anything walking around because there would be no soul to drive it.
Yeah.
It would just be a dead body at the other end.
Or would it be something soulless, so it would have no concept of morality or anything like that, have no real feeling? It would still be walking around, but it would essentially be a host of negativity.
What would be driving it, though?
Well, you'd still have the brain functioning, wouldn't you? And it depends on, there's so many different interpretations of what the soul is, isn't there? So there are some that think it's just some sort of thing around you that sort of is not your consciousness, but it entwines with it, and it's your spirit that's with you till you die. And as you say, there are others that think it's the thing that drives you, that it is your consciousness and it is directly linked to it. So if you were transferred, there would be nothing there.
There'd be no ghost in the machine.
Yeah. Good movie. Not the new one, the original.
The anime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I find this one quite interesting, as in the teleporter problem, because it does make you really think about the self. And what are you? And is it still you? And if you could have an exact copy of you, would you both be you? I mean, I know you'd then take different paths, but yeah, it's one that goes round and round and round and round in my head. And if we're not careful, I'll be sat on this one going back and forth overnight and really boring everyone.
We've already done an episode on the self, kind of.
Yeah, we have. Go check it out, and if you've got any questions, come ask us. We've then got the grandfather trolley problem. You are a time traveler. A runaway trolley is heading to kill 5 people. If you pull the lever, only 1 will die. But the person on the track is your grandfather, and your parents haven't even been born yet. What happens if you pull the lever? I love how he's dressed like Marty McFly as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that just leads into the whole paradox of things, doesn't it? It's one of those things of, if the future is set regardless and you can't change it, then even if you did pull the lever, it wouldn't switch tracks. There'd be a malfunction. It would carry on killing the 5, or it would be that your actual grandfather was never your real grandfather. Or if you do think that you can change the future, you'd be in a situation where you might wipe yourself out and therefore you'd never have come back. And or does it just start a different reality and split off? So you know, it's now a different future. That other future there is still going on, but then there's a new one. Was there anything I've missed on that one?
What happens if one of the 5 was the one who introduced the grandfather to the grandmother?
Yeah. Yeah. And by not doing it...
Again, throw yourself in front of the trolley and hope for the best.
Yeah. And this one I just chucked in because I find this one amusing. There's tons more. But it's, yeah, you can stop the trolley at any time, but doing so would disrupt the trolley service, causing the company to lose profits. And it's sort of, I left that one in there as well because it's sort of a take on the whole COVID situation.
That's exactly what it's intended for. That's what it is. It's a parallel to COVID.
Yeah. So we could stop all businesses, throw people into lockdown, and try and make sure that we restrict everyone's movements until we've managed to beat this thing. But doing so would mean some companies might lose profits. Aww.
Yeah, but it could also be like the individual guy running the vape shop who, you know, once he goes out of business, he's screwed, basically.
This is true. And there are other things to think about, like, just like you mentioned with that. There are personal businesses. But then the argument could be, well, with the world we currently live in, why hasn't he sorted it out online?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, a lot of places do that online now, don't they? A lot of online business. I know for a small business in your local town, you know, it's a bit different. But equally, he could be doing deliveries. There are other options that someone in a business could come to do. I know they're not necessarily perfect options, but yeah. But yeah, so that's the trolley problem. There's a number of other ones that you can go over. There's many different ways to think about it through a number of different moral theories and all sorts. And frankly, a lot of it just does come down to how you perceive the question. And it's good to go back and forth over these and think, but what about? And your answers will probably change the more you think about it, and also depending on the mood that you're in. With a lot of thought experiments, I think that your own personal mood can change them quite a lot.
Yeah, and especially if it's not something you particularly think about often, you just go with a sort of gut instinct for what's right. In a sort of emotivist fashion.
So, I mean, that is the trolley problem, as I mentioned.
Who created the trolley problem?
You did. That's why you're called Trolley Dave.
Exactly. No, it was actually created by Philippa Foot.
Ah. And why did she create it? What inspired her to?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
So Adam asks, what's the purpose of thought experiments in philosophy and what are their limits? We sort of covered that a bit at the beginning, but do you want to field that, Dave?
It's basically about looking at intuitions and looking at how we think about certain problems, and sometimes even driving at a conclusion for how we should be thinking about something.
And then you can collate the data and a way lots of different people perceive it and see if there are any trends on the analysis and the reasons for why they think the certain things that they do. Can be quite useful. I mean, you even see on there, like Dave pointed out something that I hadn't considered in the thought experiment. So it was like, that might change my mind. It doesn't at the moment, but I need to think on it a bit more so I can see if I could, if it, you know. But yeah, so there are other thought experiments that are worth covering off too. There are some that are very much like the trolley problem, like the captive problem, where there are 10 people in a line and there's a gun to your head and you're told to kill one of them, or all of them, including yourself, will be killed, or different variations on that. There's also like the doctor problem, which is 5 patients are brought in to a hospital, all needing a different organ replaced. There is one healthy person in this hospital as well, and as the doctor, if you killed this one person, you could harvest the organs and save the 5 people. A lot of people think about it, and in fact, before we had the discussion on our podcast, I thought of it in a very utilitarian manner. But there's an added layer of the trust of hospitals and things like that, isn't there? Where the Hippocratic Oath plays a part. If people lost faith in doctors' rules to do no harm, they'd no longer trust the institution, and therefore less people will go to hospitals. There'd be more sick people, and ongoing negative consequence going all the way around the world of people not going to doctors, people not trusting doctors. There's already enough people that don't trust things like vaccinations and medicine and use essential oils and diluted bits of the Berlin Wall to cure their ailments, and they don't work.
Or drink urine in the morning.
Oh god, yeah, or the eye wash urine. I don't understand that. Have you seen some of the people, right? There's pictures on there that are you doing eye washes with urine every day, and they're complaining that there's all this pus coming out of their eyes, and you're like, gee, I wonder why.
No, I don't generally go in for urology kind of things.
Oh, they pop up on my Facebook all the time. I wonder.
You want to change your Facebook friends?
Yeah, I've gone through too many deletions. I'm too lazy these days. But there are others that are probably a little bit different to the ones where it's do you kill or not kill. And one of them is the experience machine. Dave, do you want to take that one away?
Yeah, Adam's just mentioned Theseus' ship. It's a really good one, that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the experience machine comes from Robert Nozick. And it's to show the problems with psychological hedonism. So basically, for those that argue that the only things of value are mental states, like, can you hear an echo?
Very slightly. Is it coming
I
from
don't
me?
know. I don't know.
I'll turn my headphones down a little bit. Does that solve it?
Yeah. No, I can still hear it. Weird. It's always just the last word as well. Oh, that solved it.
My microphone, it's obviously a bit too sensitive. I might turn push to talk on for the future.
No worries. Yeah, it's about psychological hedonism. So if we argue that mental states and how they make us feel are the only things of any value, so like the mental state of happiness is the only thing of any value, the experience machine is designed, the thought experiment is designed to show that there is more that we value than just those psychological states. And the idea is this: imagine in the future, we have created a machine that allows us to plug in, that will allow us to live the most amazing lives virtually. Um, so it can fulfill all of our dreams, all of our pleasures, but none of them are actually real. It feels real. And the mental state that we get from it is the same real happiness. And the question then is, do you plug in?
Yeah, and I think on this one, when we covered this one off on the podcast as well, it was a case of, was I, if I was how I was in my probably teenage years and my younger 20s, possibly even some of my older 20s, or even on a really really bad day today, I'd probably say yes. Um, but I do have responsibilities. I've got kids. I've got a wife, and all of that, and that actually comes into my calculation. So my current state, I would definitely say no. Because I wouldn't want to leave them behind. I'd feel, even though in this world I'd probably have no memory of what I'd left behind, I don't think I could make that leap now. But I would say that I probably would have made that leap when I was younger.
I like Adam's response. Well, the thought experiment kind of goes like this, where once you're plugged in, you wouldn't remember any of that. And you could have the software bring in a virtual version of your wife and children. So you would think they were there, and they could be plugged into the machine in their own world. So
Yeah, I mean, whilst I get that, I do understand that I wouldn't have any memory of it and it could be whatever it is. But it would be a case of, I'm still aware of it now, and I would still be leaving them behind to whatever ails them, and they would be in a lot of trouble without me around. Obviously, the wife's at home looking after the kid at the moment, so I'm the only person with an income. Therefore, she wouldn't be able to pay the bills, she wouldn't be able to afford the house, wouldn't be able to feed themselves, and there would be a lot of negative effects that came from me going in. Now, was this not my current situation? As I said, when I was younger, I probably would actually go for it, because I know that's probably not what most people would say, but I think, if I could have had the ideal life and there was no one really leaning on me for anything, I had no obligations or duties or anything like that to anyone else. The idea of a virtual perfect life sounds great. I mean, I used to be wrapped up into MMOs playing for hours and hours on day, and that was my real world. I preferred that world to the world that I lived, but I understand that most people probably wouldn't think about it that way because they're not as much of a geek as me.
well, that's the thing that Robert Nozick was getting at. Um, a lot of people would choose not to plug in. Um, and that shows that there is more of value than simply the pleasure. So by not plugging in and choosing to go with your real wife, your real children, that shows that it's the actual connection that's important, not just the happiness that comes from it, but the actual real connection. So we value the real world and the real connections more than we value the kind of internal psychological state.
Yeah, which I mean definitely makes sense, and I understand why most people would. But then if we go back to when I was a hardcore MMO player, I wasn't getting that real world connection anywhere near as much. So that would probably be why it was like, well, yeah, you know, I have the best game of my life for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's the thing. I suppose it does depend. But like, if you the argument from Nozick would go something like, if you wanted to battle orcs and elves, that's the only way you could really do it in the experience machine. But say you wanted to climb Mount Everest, would a virtual version of that, even though it would give you the same psychological happiness and the same psychological state, would you feel happy with going with the virtual one, or do you need to climb the real Everest?
Yeah, and with a real world goal, it's definitely better. It's I used to watch my kid play this game called Roblox, and on it he was playing hide and seek with his friend, and I was like, "Why are you playing it in a game? She lives next door. Go play hide and seek with her. You know, go down to the park, go to those." I didn't understand that. So from that thing, I would definitely agree that if there was a real world goal, then yes, I think that it's definitely more satisfying to do it and achieve it in the real world, and especially if you're doing it with someone else as well, and you've got that camaraderie and all of that. And I know that in the experience machine you wouldn't know any different, but the idea is before you go into it you do know the difference, and as you say, that shows that there is that value for actually doing it in at least what we think of is the real world, if this even is the real world, or are we things in a vat? We did get a question: was it World of Warcraft? No. And I strongly say no. I didn't like World of Warcraft at all. It was far too simple and easy. I was a big EverQuest fan. It was one of the first MMOs, and I used to play a Wood Elf Druid called Durrell. And I also played a Dark Elf Shadow Knight called Davidian, and that name has stuck with me, and it's what I write under Answers in Reason. And I had a whole mythology and backstory for him, and he was this really evil character that just wanted to be good, but he kept fucking up along the way.
I can relate.
But yeah, I didn't like World of Warcraft. I haven't found another one since. One of the reasons I found it so addictive is because it was so very much like real life, and it's why I don't think I've liked many MMOs and games since, in the sense that if you wanted to swim, you know, or walking, running, everything like that, you leveled up, you got experience in absolutely everything you did. So with the magic spells that you were casting, when you got a new spell, you couldn't just cast it straight away. You had to train up in that type of magic. If it was a conjuration spell, you had to get more and more and more and better at it, otherwise your spell would fizzle. And your running and your swimming and things like that got faster as the more you practice them, and that I found like really, really addictive. And when it came to games like World of Warcraft, it was just like, you know, you got a new spell. Oh, I've leveled up. Oh, I bought that spell. Oh, I can cast it perfectly. And it was just like, there was no real sense of achievement in it for me. Now, if we tie that back to the experience machine, if it was all too easy, I wouldn't be satisfied. So the experience machine for me, the perfect one for me, would have to be one that wasn't completely perfect. I would have to feel the way all the way up, feel that I've actually achieved the goals myself, rather than it being perfect from the get-go. So if there ever is an experience machine, don't build it like World of Warcraft. Try and aim for EverQuest.
Well, it's kind of funny you mention all that, because Philippe de Brigard came up with another version of the experience machine to show that it's not necessarily the connection to the real world that we value. and it's a sort of reverse experience machine. One where you're living your life, and say you're sat in your living room watching your favorite TV show, and there's a knock at the door, and you answer the door, and it's a guy with a briefcase. Have you played Fallout 4?
I have indeed, yeah.
Oh, you know the guy that knocks at the door offering you bunker insurance to come into the bunker at the very beginning of the game.
Like the initial video, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. And this guy says to you, I'm sorry to break this to you, but you're trapped in an experience machine. You shouldn't have been in. It's glitched. You're stuck. We can't get you back except by letting you know when you have to want to come back. So do you then choose to go back? You're in this almost perfect life. You're living your life happily. Do you go back to the real world without knowing what you could be going back to?
Yeah, I mean, there was even that there was a similar thing in Vanilla Sky. Have you seen that?
No.
It's a Tom Cruise movie.
Yeah, Tom Cruise and Penelope Cruz, I think.
Yes, and I think was Cameron Diaz in it as well. It's
Yeah.
been a while since I've seen it, but yeah. And he actually gets spoilers if you haven't seen a movie that's like 10, 15 years old. I can't even remember the full plot of it, but essentially he ends up in a car accident, and he is in a form of the experience machine, living out the end of his days, his own personal heaven. But he's very troubled because of the things that he did that got him put there, and all of these, it keeps glitching essentially because of his own internal processes. And they can either, I think it's like they can either sort of like wipe his memory, or he can come out of it. And he chooses to come out of it. He's been in it for 50 or so years. He might not have as much money, etc., but he chooses to come out of it. And I think most people, if they found that their reality was not real, would probably choose to come out of that reality, unless they were like, how much memory of your life do you have before? If you knew before, if you somehow them telling you that, yeah, you can come out of it, and actually you happen to be someone who was manically depressed and for whatever reason, but in this machine you're happy, you've got a bit of context there, you would probably go, well, no, I'm actually happy in here, I wasn't happy out there. But if you've got no clue, let's just say right now, any one of us gets a knock at the door and goes, yeah, look, have you heard of the brain in the vat? It's sort of like that. Except you're not just a brain, it's all of you. You're there. You just don't remember anything. I can't promise you your life's good. Yeah, I can imagine that there is this willingness to come out and experience what is real.
Yep. When Debregard did sort of like research into this, and he sort of asked questions of people, and he did studies, and took statistics. He called that one the neutral one, where the person is told this, and not told what they're going back to. So they called that the neutral scenario. And in that one, where am I here? 54% said they would go back to reality, while 46% would prefer to remain connected.
Interesting. I'd have thought that would have been slightly higher on the people wanting to return to reality. I suppose it's hard to put yourself in the mind of other people, though. But yeah, I suppose with the big unknown, it is a scary thing. And if you are completely happy, yeah, I can understand why people would be hesitant. So what about the context?
Okay. He also did one where it was a positive scenario, where it's the same thing, except at the end, the people are told, okay, in the real world, you're actually a multimillionaire living in Monaco.
So most people would definitely come out. And what I'm intrigued, how many of them actually decided to come out? I could imagine it. We're looking at what, 98%?
50% of the participants said they would like to go back to reality, and 50% said they would like to remain connected.
What? So that's what? So if they were a multimillionaire, they were less inclined to go, because you said it was 55% if they didn't know, and 50% if they were a multimillionaire. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? It's basically an example of the status quo bias. They already have all these good things. They know that they're happy. They have all these connections to other people. They might not be real, but the experience of them feels real. The emotions feel real. The psychological states feel real. So they prefer to stay as they are, knowing that they are already happy. Just because you're a multimillionaire doesn't necessarily mean that you're happy.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I suppose there is the fact that money doesn't necessarily buy you happiness, and they could reason that, well, hell, if I'm a multimillionaire and I've got this perfect life, but I've decided to put myself into this experience machine, maybe I wasn't happy with my life, and that's why I've decided to be there, and that's why I'm now happy in here.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point, and one I'll come to very shortly. And there was also a negative scenario, as I mentioned, and this one is probably the most shocking of them all. In this one, it's the same thing. You're told that you're in the experience machine, but at the end, instead of being told you're a multimillionaire, you're told that you're actually a prisoner in a supermax prison somewhere in America. Hang on, where am I here? In reality, you were a prisoner at a maximum security prison in West Virginia. How many do you think chose to go back, and how many do you think chose to stay?
Well, I was so far off base with the last one, but I hadn't fully thought it through. In this one, so my gut reaction again, which is probably going to be wrong, is that if I was a prisoner or I had a perfect life, I'd choose the perfect life, and I can imagine we're looking at least 90%. Although I would assume that 100% of people would choose to stay in rather than go out. But I'm going to be completely wrong, aren't I, Dave?
No, your first answer was quite close. For the negative scenario, 13% of the participants said they would prefer to go back to reality, and 87% would prefer to remain connected.
Hooray, I've got something almost right. I'll call that a win for today.
But it's kind of shocking that 13% would choose to go back. But it also shows that the people refusing to plug in might not necessarily be guided by the desire to have a connection to reality.
Yeah. Interesting. So, yeah. So, in that negative circumstance, you think that those 13% who did decide to go back, they have weighed up that a real life, even a bad real life, is better than a good fake one.
Yeah, something like that.
Whereas the majority of people, at least in that one, would go, I'd rather have a good existence than one stuck in prison.
Yeah, because for all you know, once your time is up, you will be pulled out anyway and set out into the real world, and you'll avoid the dangers of the supermax prison.
Although, if prison ended up being a perfect holiday, surely that might encourage you to commit more crimes so you could go back to the perfect reality.
Yeah, but what about when you're pulled out after your time's done? You've been ripped out of the most perfect scenario. Wouldn't that be a punishment?
It would definitely be a punishment, but if that was the case, wouldn't you try and get back in? If you were thinking about it,
Yeah, but you would never be able to live that same life again, would you? You'd be put back into a new scenario, a new start. You would lose everything you thought that you had gained.
yeah. but then would you be unaware at that point in time again until it was time to come out? I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, it could just be that you were put in there as some kind of experiment for Microsoft's new VR technology.
So it starts off with the vaccines.
Yeah, but yeah, it kind of shows that Notic's instincts for why people weren't plugging in, he might have jumped to a few hasty conclusions. And that it might have been more something like status quo bias driving their choice to remain unplugged.
Yeah, yeah, I suppose. Especially if they are generally quite comfortable with what they've got and all that. Yeah, yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. Um, Interesting. I wonder though how much with these thought experiments is how much context there is around them anyway of the people that these questions are being fielded to. You know, their
They were
age.
mostly university students.
Right. So these are people who probably all view themselves as having quite prosperous lives ahead of them.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's another one of the discussions that centers around it, where the person who's already living a reasonably comfortable life might want to continue that, but imagine an abused child given the option of plugging in and having perfect happiness for a while. That abused child probably wouldn't want to continue on with the life that they have. They would choose to go into the machine.
Yeah. Similar to what I said earlier about how if you asked me this question in my teenage years and probably the bulk of my 20s, I would have definitely chosen to go in because it would have been a better life than I was experiencing. But if you ask me now, I probably wouldn't, and I'm having an all right life, but I've also got obligations and other things to consider as well. So yeah, if he's just asking mainly university students, they probably do view themselves to have quite prosperous lives ahead of them. Um, so it's not a fair test.
Yeah, but this was the reverse machine as well. You know, the reverse experience machine. Would you want to go back to real life? Those were university students being asked as well, and many of them said they would choose to remain plugged in.
Yeah, unless they were in prison.
Yeah, but still, 13% of them said they would go back to reality.
Yeah, I mean they're just crazy.
Yeah. Um, Dan Wagers also talks about something called imaginative resistance. Um, so one of the things that stops them plugging in is imaginative resistance. So when he when they're being asked, would you plug into this machine? The things that are stopping them might not necessarily be they want a connection to reality. It's underlying ideas like, well, I've seen computers and computers break down all the time. So how can I be guaranteed that it's going to run perfectly and make me perfectly happy? What happens if something goes wrong with it? And they can't imagine being in this perfect scenario. So that causes their ideas to change about how they see it. They have a resistance to actually imagining that idea.
So I take it, you know, when they're presented, it is the context given that it will be perfect forever and nothing will go wrong,
Yes,
or
it is. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they can still imagine that. There
right?
might still be all these underlying assumptions like um, it'll break down, or, other things will go wrong. They just can't, they just plain can't imagine a scenario like that. Think of something like the trolley problem when you say, what would you do? And they say, well, I would jump in front of the trolley. It's because they can't imagine the scenario as it's put to them. They have to add these extra layers to it for it to make sense to them.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair enough. Uh, Yeah, I suppose it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's the way we are basically induction machines, aren't we? So if your experience of technology forever has been that there's always bits of glitches going on, etc. Even if someone tells you it's perfect. I mean, how many times have you been told the new operating system will have no problems, and then it does?
Yeah.
So even someone assuring you that in this particular situation, it's going to be perfect, there's still going to be that, I don't think it would be. And they're going to add that context in themselves, even though these thought experiments shouldn't necessarily have it in.
Yeah, exactly. Wagers, he creates a sort of in his paper, he tries to create a scenario where it removes all of the status quo bias and it removes all of the sort of imaginative resistance. Let's see if I can find it here. Okay. His is something like this. It's 2062 and you were riding a hover tube to town. You have been offered a permanent spot in an experience machine and are now trying to decide if you should accept. You have had a go in an experience machine before and know that they provide an unpredictable roller coaster ride of remarkable experiences. When in the machine, it still felt like you made autonomous decisions and occasionally faced tough situations, such as striving for your goals and feeling grief. Although you didn't really do these things, your experiences were also vastly more enjoyable and varied in the machine. You also recall that while you were in the experience machine, you had no idea that you had gotten into a machine or that your experiences were generated by a machine. If you accept the spot, then you would stay in an experience machine permanently. If you reject a spot, then you would never be offered a spot again. Your life would be the same length in an experience machine as it would otherwise have been. Ignoring how your family, friends, and any other dependents and society in general might be affected, and assuming that your experience machines always work perfectly, what is the best thing for you to do for yourself in this situation?
For me, I'd go in, ignoring all that other context. Yeah.
Yeah. In this one, he refers to that as the self scenario. And about 34% of participants responding to this one said that they would connect to the experience machine. And that is.
Do you think that is because they can't disassociate with their thoughts of their family and all of that, and society, their family, etc. Do you think that is because even though they've said ignore that as part of your equation, they still have to put that in, and that's why it's only 34%?
Possibly.
See, it'd be really good if you actually got a few more answers as to why people have answered the way that they've answered.
Well, that's one of the things with Wagers surveys. They asked the people to explain their choice. And in the self scenario, of the 34% that chose to go in, of the ones that chose not to go in, 31% of those that chose not to go in provided an irrelevant main justification for their choice. So stuff like bad experiences are required to appreciate good experiences or to develop properly. Unpredictable or surprising experiences are better than pre-programmed ones. Getting out every 2 years would be depressing, although, that answers like that. So basically not really connected directly to the thought experiment itself.
Yeah, that's so that answers, but equally though, that's only 31% of the people that chose not to go in added some irrelevant context. So do they get the answers for the rest of them?
I'm just skimming through the paper now. It's been a long time since I read it. I skimmed it last week, but he sort of changes it then, and he changes it to a stranger scenario. So rather than you being plugged in, it asks whether somebody else should be plugged in. Do you think this person should be plugged in? And
Same context, or is it?
yeah,
Different?
exactly the same thought experiment, using the same wording and everything. Except instead of saying, would you plug in, it says, would you advise Boris to plug in?
Well, I've already said yes to myself, so I would do the same for anyone else. Based on the fact that, was it 36% people said for the self to go in?
Yeah.
I take it there's no context over who Boris is. It's someone who's exactly the same as you, just not you.
Yeah.
I can't imagine the results being too different. There might be a few more people who said, yeah, you should go in. But I can't imagine the results being too different.
In this scenario, 52% of the participants responded that the stranger should be plugged in.
Fair, that's a little bit higher than I was thinking, but not too much higher than I thought it would be. What do you think that the big change there is, though?
It kind of removes the status quo bias, doesn't it?
Yeah, so they can see that it's the better option. It's just the fact that they're not having to make the decision for themselves; they're making it for someone else.
Yeah.
And what about? Sorry.
It's just they don't know the other person's connections, how their life is, or anything. They just go by. It's just directly, should somebody plug into an experience machine? Whereas in the self scenario, they already know all their connections. They know their enjoyments. They know their relatives. That kind of thing. So they want to continue with that life. Hence the status quo bias.
So, what about the people that said that they would advise against the person going in? Is there enough information there on why they said that?
I'm just skimming through and I can't really see it. I'd have to reread. I'm going to write an article on all this afterwards to follow up this stream. So I'll try and put all that information in there when I find it.
Cool. No, that's good. May as well chuck a link to the video in it as well, and vice versa. Once you've written the article and published it, we'll put a link in the notes wherever you're watching this, whether it's on Twitch or YouTube or whatever. And then you'll have all the stats that we didn't have to hand right now.
Well, in the case in these sort of scenarios, Wagers also asked whether your cousin should plug in and whether your friend should plug in. And in the case of the cousin, 46% of people responded that they would tell their cousin to plug in, and 43% said that they would tell their friend to plug in.
Interesting. So they potentially value their friends more than their cousin, and they would miss their friend more than their cousin. Perhaps that's why there's that 3% variance.
That's what it sounds like to me.
Interestingly, 46% is what I was thinking the other person was going to be. The original answer for that was 54 or something. But yeah. Interesting.
But again, going back to what we were saying about the trolley problem, and if you change the people on the track to on the side, the track with one person, you have a doctor who's about to cure cancer, and on the 5 people, it's 5 pedophiles who've escaped from prison. People are going to go for the 5 people over the one. This sort of shows the kind of difference that the context will make in people deciding what choice to go for.
Yeah, and I suppose it should. The context should always make a difference to what you're deciding, shouldn't it? Really, it's just interesting there are certain things that I'd expect to be higher, and I recognize that we all think about things in a different way, but I am surprised by some of the answers. But then I am still surprised by back to the trolley problem and the people who can't help but add the context in. You can lay out every single parameter, and they will still put in extra things. You will say your only option is to either pull the lever or not pull the lever, and they will still say, well, I'd try and pull the brakes. No, you have the lever. That's it. That's all you can do in this situation. Well, I'd chuck rocks. No. and it's amazing how people can't stick to the parameters of a thought experiment. And I can also understand why, because they're awkward, they're horrible. No one likes to think, going back to the fat man problem, no one likes to think that they could actually do something as horrible as killing someone. But if they're your options, you've got to choose what you do. And at the end of the day, you're not saying that this is definitely what you would do. You're saying, this is what I think I would most likely do, and these are my reasons for it. And as we said earlier, your mood and things like that can heavily change the way you think about it. But they, going back to the context thing as well with the trolley problem, you sometimes have people going, well, actually, maybe you should just let the 5 people die because you don't know if they're all murderers. There's more chance of them being murderers, and you're like, right, okay, but there's also more chance of all of them or one of them being someone that's going to cure cancer. There's no point in adding this additional context in, because you're starting to add a bias to it, and you're starting to go, well, they could be bad. Like, okay, they could be good. There's no point. Just take all lives as equal and just think about the problem, and with these little experiments, answer them as they're intended. Stop trying to add additional layers to it. Create a new trolley problem if you want additional layers to it. I mean, there was one that we created about a year ago because there was it was to do, there was a big old abortion debate going on Twitter, and it was like, right, okay, there's 2 pregnant women on the track or 1 pregnant woman on the track, and on the other side there is where the 1 man would be, there's 100 viable embryos, right? Which would you choose? Do you allow the pregnant woman to die, or do you pull the lever and you smash the 100 viable embryos? And that was just to highlight the fact that there is a difference between, a viable embryo and 100 of them, they're all potential lives, and a woman who is currently alive carrying a 6-month-old baby who we would say is conscious as well. And generally, people did answer the way you expected them to. They would try and save the woman. But you could tell it was making some people feel incredibly awkward, because it was making them really think about this situation where they're like, they go on and on and on about how abortion is murder. And I'm not getting into an abortion debate right now, but this particular trolley problem that we put together showed that actually, when it comes down to it, they do value a life above 100 potential lives.
That's why chicken is more expensive than egg in the supermarkets.
Like it. But which came first?
Me, usually. Sadly.
So, was there any other thought experiments you wanted to cover off before we go? I know that Adam meant Theseus's ship. Did you want to go over that one, Dave?
Well, that's in the self episode, but it's essentially you have a ship that's I'll break it down really simple. You have a ship that's out at sea and it's made of wood, and as the ship is traveling, it takes damage, and each bit of wood is replaced. Is it still the original ship that set sail? Or say a ship has come back from a war and it's put in the dock and it's repaired and made to look pristine. Is it still that original ship?
And the really, really simple version of this one is the axe argument, isn't it? Where you've got the handle and the head. And over years, the head gets sharpened and eventually wears down and gets replaced. And then the handle breaks and that gets replaced. And time and time and time again, this gets replaced. Is it still the same axe?
Yeah, there's another one as well, similar to that, called the janitor's mop, where a janitor, a bunch of kids are leaving school, and as a gift for the janitor who's always helped them, they buy him a brand new mop. Now, over the years, it wears down, he replaces the head, the handle gets replaced. Is it still his mop?
And it's interesting, isn't it? It's definitely the way people perceive it, and it sort of ties in a way to the transporter problem as well, doesn't it?
Sort of, yeah.
I know that's quite a tenuous link to it, but it is sort of the same thing. Everything, all the molecules are replaced with completely different ones. But then you could even have the one with humans, where all of our cells over time are constantly being replaced. Are we still the same self?
Yeah.
Cool, awesome. Well, if there aren't any more, are there any questions from the audience quickly before we go, or did you have another one, Dave?
Well, there's loads, and I think possibly I'll try and find time to gather a bunch of them. We can go through a bunch of them on another stream. Just look at all the various different. I mean, there's Mary's Room as a philosophy of mind experiment, where a girl is brought up in a black and white room her whole life, and she spends all of her time studying the wavelengths of color and all that kind of thing. So she has all the physical information possible about the experience of color, but has never actually experienced color. Then she steps outside of the room and sees a red rose for the first time. Has she gained new knowledge about color?
Yes. But yes, because knowledge of, perhaps, if you were to do it, an experiential knowledge. She may understand the theory of color, but never having experienced it. Sorry, this is gut answer.
She's learned what it's like to experience color, basically.
Yeah.
She has knowledge of what it's like to experience color.
Yeah. So.
But yeah, I mean, I'll spend some time over the next week or two going through all my old notes and all my books and whatnot. And I'll gather a bunch of different thought experiments together and we can go over them.
Awesome. That sounds really good, actually. It'd be good to have another show on thought experiments. Also, if any of you haven't checked it out, we released a new article today on morality, agency, intent, and how free will / determinism affects that. So if you go to answersinreason.com, it'll be there for you. We've got another few coming out shortly.
Yeah, I've got my one on epistemic justification that I've got to finish. I just haven't really been up to writing the last couple of weeks, unfortunately.
That's fair enough. We all go through peaks and troughs of productivity. I know we've all been a little bit lax. Also, one of the authors who did a couple of articles in the early days of Answers in Reason has actually come back. He's just come back onto Facebook over the last couple of months, and he's asked if he can do an article on how the United States of America has handled the pandemic, the COVID pandemic. So I said, yeah, go for it. I think that'd be a very interesting read. Be nice to sort of hear a full rundown of everything from someone that actually lives there, and rather than just the little clips here and there that you see. So I'm quite interested in reading that one myself. And other than that, we've got a few others on the go, and we're going to be trying out some new things. But yeah, I think that's it for tonight. Have you got anything else you needed to add, Dave?
Nope, that's ideal. It's been a fun stream.
Yeah, definitely.
And thank you, RB and Adam, for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, RB and Adam, for joining us on the chat. Anyone else, please feel free to actually post any messages. You can get us on either YouTube or via the SciPhi channel on our Discord, or via Twitch. All of those messages will all come straight through to us. Also, if you're on Facebook, they do come through, but if we send a message back, it doesn't go back to you, but it all appears on screen. But yes, awesome. And yes, Adam, if you have any experiments that you would like us to cover off in the future, please let us know. We will definitely get on that and do some more, probably in the next couple of weeks or so. There may be a stream on Thursday. If not, we'll definitely be back next Tuesday. We haven't planned what it's going to be yet, so I can't whet your appetite. I do apologise. We've been incredibly busy. I'm shut up, Dave. I'm currently trying to sell my house and buy a house, so I have been a little bit more distracted than usual and haven't had the time to put together as much. So I do apologise for everything and being even more vacant than normal, but we will be back up and running at full speed soon, I hope. Thank you everybody who has joined in, especially those of you who have joined us in the chat. Have yourselves a good one.
Good night, all.
Night all.